It is 3 o'clock in the morning on a quiet, affluent residential street in North London. The world is asleep, but the surveillance cameras are wide open, watching a driveway that houses a £90,000 Range Rover Sport. In the grainy monochrome footage, a figure approaches the vehicle. He does not carry a crowbar. He does not have a brick to smash the window. He does not look like a hardened criminal, muscling his way into a heist. He looks like a bored teenager playing a video game. In his hand is a small, rectangular device with a glowing screen. To the untrained eye, and indeed to any police officer who might have patted him down minutes earlier, it looks exactly like a Nintendo Game Boy, a retro toy from the 90s. The figure stands by the driver's door. He presses a few buttons on the device. There is no alarm. There is no shattered glass. The headlights of the luxury SUV blink once, a polite welcome to its owner. The door unlocks with a soft mechanical thud. The engine roars to life, shattering the suburban silence. In less than 60 seconds, the car is reversing out of the driveway and vanishing into the night. This was not a lucky break. It was not a one-off. It was a calculated digital assault on the very concept of security, executed by a gang that treated Grand Theft Auto like a video game. But they would soon learn that while you can hit restart in a game, you cannot respawn in the real world when the National Crime Agency kicks down your door. This is the story of a new breed of criminal. For decades, the image of the British car thief was one of brute force and hot wiring, of broken steering locks and shattered windows. But as the manufacturers evolved, so did the underworld. By the late 2010s, London had become the supercar capital of the world, a playground for the ultra-wealthy who parked their assets on the streets of Chelsea, Kensington and Essex. But these cars were computers on wheels, protected by complex encryption and keyless entry systems designed to be impenetrable. To the average thief, these rolling fortresses were impossible to steal. But to Garden, Thomas Kavanagh and their crew of highly organized tech-savvy criminals, these security systems were just puzzles waiting to be solved. They were not interested in the loose change in the glove box or the stereo system. They were hunting big game. The gang, based out of East London and the Essex borders, represented a shift in the criminal landscape. They were not desperate addicts looking for a quick score. They were professional, disciplined and terrifyingly efficient. They understood that the war for control of the streets was no longer being fought with crowbars, but with code. They had acquired a piece of technology that was whispered about in the dark corners of the internet, but rarely seen by law enforcement. It was a device worth £20,000 on the black market, a digital skeleton key that could bypass the most advanced security systems in the world. They called it the SOS device, but the press and the police would come to know it by a different name, the Game Boy. The mechanics of their operation were as elegant as they were devastating. The device was encased in the shell of a retro handheld console, complete with the innocent-looking directional pad and buttons. But inside the plastic casing was a sophisticated computer designed to communicate directly with a modern car's electronic control unit. When the gang targeted a vehicle, usually a high-end Range Rover, Porsche or Mercedes, they didn't need the owner's key fob to be nearby. This was not a relay attack, where thieves boost the signal from a key inside the house. This was far more advanced. The Game Boy device generated the unique cryptographic codes required to unlock the doors and start the engine from scratch. It was a brute force digital attack that tricked the car into believing the owner was sitting in the driver's seat. The gang moved with military precision. They would scout the target areas during the day, identifying high-value vehicles parked in accessible driveways. They looked for the specific models that were in high demand in the international black market. Once the target was marked, they would return under the cover of darkness. The extraction team would arrive in a stolen vehicle with false plates. The operator would approach the car with the Game Boy. The device would cycle through thousands of potential codes in seconds until it found the digital handshake. The lights would flash. The door would open. The entire process took less time than it takes to tie a shoelace. Once the car was secured, the clock started ticking. The gang knew that modern luxury cars are fitted with trackers and GPS systems. They had to move fast to neutralize the threat. The stolen vehicles were driven immediately to quiet side streets or industrial estates, where the plates were swapped. The trackers were hunted down and ripped out, often leaving the interior panels hanging loose. But for the gang, the damage didn't matter. The value was in the chassis and the engine. From there, the cars were moved to slaughterhouses, nondescript garages and warehouses, where they were either stripped for parts or prepared for export. The scale of the operation was staggering. In a matter of months, the gang had snatched over £1.7 million worth of vehicles. They were stealing to order. A buyer in the Middle East wanted a white Range Rover autobiography. They would find one in Chigwell, steal it on Tuesday, and have it in a shipping container by Thursday. A contact in Africa needed a Porsche Cayenne. They would lift one from a driveway in Surrey. The money was rolling in. It was cash in hand, untraceable, and tax-free. They were living the high life, fueled by the arrogance that comes with easy money. They believed they were untouchable because they believed they were invisible. They weren't leaving fingerprints. They weren't leaving DNA. They were leaving nothing but empty driveways and confused victims. But in the world of organized crime, arrogance is always the precursor to the fall. While the gang felt invincible, the sheer volume of their thefts had triggered alarms at the highest levels of policing. The National Vehicle Crime Intelligence Service and the Metropolitan Police were beginning to notice a pattern. This wasn't random crime. It was too clean, too fast, and too specific. The same models were disappearing from the same areas, and there was never any sign of forced entry. The investigators knew they were dealing with a professional outfit using advanced technology. The hunt began, not on the streets but in the data. Detectives began to piece together the movements of the phantom thieves. They analyzed hours of CCTV footage from around the crime scenes. They tracked the movements of known associates. They started to build a picture of the network. The breakthrough came when they identified the cars being used by the thieves to travel to and from the crime scenes. Automatic number plate recognition cameras picked up a vehicle that seemed to be shadowing the stolen cars. It was the loose thread that would unravel the entire sweater. They watched as the gang scouted neighborhoods. They watched as they met in quiet pubs and parking lots. They began to understand the hierarchy. Garden and Thomas Kavanagh were identified as key players. But the police needed more than just suspicion. They needed to catch them in the act. They needed to find the device. The Game Boy was the smoking gun. Without it, the defense could argue that these men were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. The police needed to prove that these men possessed the technology to commit the crimes. The investigation tightened like a noose. Police uncovered evidence of the gang's incredible hubris. On the phones of the suspects, officers would later find videos filmed by the thieves themselves. In one clip, a gang member films the dashboard of a stolen car as they tear through the streets, laughing and bragging about the theft. In another, they film the Game Boy device in action, demonstrating its power like a tech reviewer showing off a new gadget. They were documenting their own crimes, drunk on the power they held over the sleeping city. They thought the encryption on their phones would protect them, just as the Game Boy protected them from the car alarms. The net closed in May 2021. The police had enough. It was time to strike. In a coordinated series of raids, officers smashed through the doors of the suspects' homes. The element of surprise was total. In the chaos of the arrests, the gang members tried to scramble, but there was nowhere to go. During the search of one of the suspects' cars, hidden in a secret compartment, officers found it. The device. It looked innocent enough, a block of grey plastic with a small screen, but when the digital forensics experts turned it on, the innocent facade vanished. The screen lit up, not with a game of Tetris but with a menu of vehicle manufacturers. Range Rover, Jaguar, Mercedes. It was the master key to the city. The analysis of the device was chilling. It revealed the history of the gang's activities. It showed the codes they had generated, the cars they had targeted. Combined with the phone data, the CCTV footage, and the tracking of the stolen vehicles, the case against them was overwhelming. The police were able to link the gang to the theft of 5 highly specific vehicles worth hundreds of thousands of pounds, and link them via conspiracy charges to many more. The £1.7 million figure was likely just the tip of the iceberg. The legal proceedings that followed were a formality. The evidence was irrefutable. The defense could not explain away the specialized hacking tool, the videos of the thefts, or the coordinated movements of the gang members. In court, the true nature of their operation was laid bare. This was not petty theft. It was a sophisticated criminal enterprise that utilized military-grade technology to prey on the public. The judge described their actions as professional, planned, and organized. Thomas Kavanagh, aged 28, and Dylan Garden, aged 24, stood in the dock as their empire of stolen steel crumbled around them. The arrogance that had defined their rise was gone, replaced by the grim reality of a prison cell. They were sentenced to substantial jail terms, removed from the streets they had treated as their personal shopping mall. The sentencing sent a message, but it also served as a warning. The story of the Game Boy Gang is a stark illustration of the modern arms race between criminals and society. As manufacturers build higher walls, criminals build taller ladders. The Game Boy device is still out there, available on the dark web to anyone with enough Bitcoin and the right connections. The car industry scrambled to update their software, to patch the holes that the gang had exploited. But for every patch, there is a new exploit. For every lock, there is a new key. The victims of the gang were left to deal with the aftermath, the insurance premiums, the loss of security, the violation of their homes. For the residents of London, the case was a reminder that the technology we rely on to protect us is only as strong as its weakest line of code. The Game Boy Gang had turned the city's wealth against itself, proving that in the digital age, you don't need a gun to rob a bank, and you don't need a key to steal a fortune. As the heavy doors of the prison slammed shut on Garden and Kavanagh, the streets of London were a little safer, but the silence of the suburbs remains fragile. Somewhere in the darkness, another screen is glowing, another code is being compiled, and the next generation of thieves is waiting for the system to blink. The game is over for this crew, but the game itself never really ends.